Masechet Sotah Daf Mem Tet, and the final daf of the Masechet. We're continuing with the Mishnah that mentioned various things that happened after the destruction of the second Bet HaMikdash. It says, Upasku Anshe Amana, men of faith have ceased. Amar Rabbi Yitzchak, Elu Bnei Adam Shen Ma'aminim B'Kadosh Baruch Hu. These are people. Ma'amin doesn't actually mean to believe in, but rather to trust in Kadosh Baruch Hu. Detanya, Rabbi Eliezer HaGadol Omer, Kol mi sheyesh lo pat besalo, ve'omer ma ochal lemachar eno ela mikatane amana. Rabbi Eliezer had a high bar for this. Is anyone who has bread in his basket to eat today, and he's wondering, oh no, what am I going to eat tomorrow? That person has little faith, right? You have what to eat today, so be happy and trust that Hashem will provide something for tomorrow. So this is a very high bar, because I think most people, if they had only a day's worth of food and the possibility of starving tomorrow, they probably would worry. So these are the people who cease to be during the destruction. Rabbi Elazar explained a similar idea from Pasuk that says, who plunders the day of small things? Means what causes the reward of the righteous to be plundered, to be gone, to be wasted in the future. It's the little trust that they had. So that's all one opinion, following the previous one, that these are people of little faith, and so they can build up a lot of good things, but because they have little faith, and so their reward is wasted away. A different altogether interpretation is by Rava, that says this is the children of wicked people who, as a punishment for what their fathers did, their sons, their children die young. And that baz in that pasuk is referring to those children who plunder or destroy the father's future punishment, and for the benefit of their fathers. And the children come to Ribono Shel Olam in the heavenly court and say, since you're going to, in the future, in the world to come, punish them, why did you blunt their teeth and give them such punishment with the death of their children in their lifetimes? In other words, it's because they lost their children in their lifetimes, and that is terrible, terrible punishment. And therefore, they should not be deserving of such great punishment in the world to come. And so that's what their children will argue on their behalf. Amar Rabbi Ela'ah bar Yebarechya. I think this is a beautiful name. I don't know anybody named this, right? Yebarechya. God should bless him. Ilmale tefilato shel David hayu kol Yisrael mochre rebab shneimar shita Adonai mora lahem. He teaches that if David in Tehillim did not pray for Israel, they would all be selling fat, a low line occupation, because the pasuk says, place mastery, may give dignity to them, and so because of that prayer, people can have more dignified occupations than just selling fat. ואמר רבי אלעא בר יברחיה, אלמלא תפילתו של חבקוק היו שני תלמידי חכמים מתכסים בטלית אחת ועוסקים בתורה. Similarly, if Habakkuk had not prayed, then the sages would be so poor that two students would have to share one blanket and learn Torah, because they wouldn't have enough money for two cloaks. They'd have to share one cloak. Shene'emar Adonai shamati shimacha yareti Adonai pa'olcha bekereb shanim hayehu al tikre bekereb shanim ela bikrob shenayim. Pasuk says, Hashem, I heard your report and was afraid. Hashem, revive your work in the midst of the years, but don't read it as years, but rather within two, meaning in the closeness of two. So you should not, Hashem, hear my prayer, so that we should not have to have two sages have to share one cloak. Amar Rabbi El'ah bar Yebarichia, Shene Talmidei Chachamim melachin b'derech ve'en be'enehen divrei Torah ruin lisaref ba'esh. Two sages, two scholars who are walking on traveling together, and they have no words of Torah. They don't share words of Torah. It's worthy of them to be burnt in fire. Right? It should be natural. This should be your interest. This should be your focus of concentration all the time. Words of Torah. Once in a while, you could talk about which way is the best way to go in the traffic. But certainly, somewhere along the line, they should be speaking words of Torah. And if not, then something wrong. We can learn this from Eliyahu Nabi and Elisha, his student, who about whom it says that they were walking along the way, and a chariot of fire came between them. Now, why didn't they get burnt? Because it says v'daber, hol haloch v'daber. They were speaking. Obviously, they were speaking in divrei Torah, and that's why they were not burnt. Otherwise, they would have been by the fire. Amar Rabbi El'ah bar Yebarichia, Shene Talmidei Chachamim hadarin ba'ir achat ve'notnochin ze laze b'halacha, had met ve'had goleh. If you have two sages who live in the same city and they are not pleasant and respectful of each other in halacha, it's of course they can disagree and have arguments, have discussions, but they should respect each other's opinion and show good leadership, especially to the people who live in the city, so that they can follow their example. But if they don't, if they're fighting and make it personal, then one of them will die and one of them will be exiled. Shenemar lanu shama rosech asher yisachet reho bebli da'at ve'en da'at ela Torah. Shenemar nidmu ami bebli hadat. Very creative interpretation of the pasuk regarding someone who kills who kills in error, so he has to run. That Roseach has to go and flee to the city of refuge because he killed his friend without premeditation, without knowledge, even bishogeg. But we're reading bibli da'at to mean without da'at, and that's without Torah, meaning if they aren't nice to each other in their learning of Torah, then it mentions here lanus, that's the one who will be exiled. It also mentions roseach, one of them will die. And so that's how important it is to get along. Amar Rabbi Yehuda bered Rabbi Chaya, kol tamid chacham ha'osek b'Torah mitoch hadachak תפילתו נשמע שנאמר כי עם בציון ישב בירושלים בחוד לא תבכה חנון יחנך לכל זעקך כשומעתו ענך וכתיב בהצרב נתן אדוני לכם לחם שר ומים לחס. Any Torah scholar who learns Torah in poverty, even though he's impoverished, but still nevertheless he figures out a way to make ends meet and he devotes his time to learn Torah, his prayers will be answered. As it says, the people in Sion and Yerushalayim, you shall weep no more. He shall be gracious to you at the voice of your cry. When he shall hear, you will answer. Hashem will answer the cries, right, of these people. And the very next pasuk says that Hashem will give them a little bread and a little bit of water. So, in the merit of having just a little bread and a little water and concentrating on Torah, Hashem will answer their prayers. Now that we quoted this pasuk in Yeshaya, chapter 30, we continue in that same pasuk. Rabbi Abahu Omer, masbi'in oto miziv shechina, shenema vayu anecha ra'ot et morecha. Not only will his prayers be answered, but he will even be satiated with Hashem's glory, the glory of his shechina. It says your eyes will see morecha, your teacher. This is taken in other contexts to mean that you should learn from your teacher face to face, to see your teacher. But here morecha is talking about the divine teacher, that he will be full with God's presence. Rabbi Acha bar Hanina Amar, Af en hapargod nin'al befanav shenemar velo yikanef od morecha. And furthermore, the partition, the heavenly partition that's hiding the divine presence, will not be locked before him, as the pasuk contingent says, that he will not, your teacher will not hide himself anymore. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel Omer, Mishum Rabbi Yoshua, Yom Shechareh Bet HaMikdash, and Vechule, back to the Mishnah, says that from the time of the Bet HaMikdash is destroyed, there's no day that doesn't have a curse. Amar Rava, Bechol Yom Vayom, Meruba Killato Mishel Chaverosh, Nema Boker Tomar Miiten, Eire Baboker Tomar Miiten Bokes. Not only does every day have a curse, but Ravak says, every day gets worse and worse. The curse is greater than the one before. How do we know this? Because the pasuk in Devarim says in the curses section, in the morning you'll say, "Oh, I wish it was night," and at night you'll say, "I wish it was morning." So the simple reading of this pasuk is, in the morning is so bad. So you'll say, "Oh, I can't wait till this day ends. Maybe tomorrow will be better." And at night, it's also so bad. You say, "Oh, I can't wait till morning for this to be over." However, this Gemara reads it the opposite way. If you interpret it as I just did, that's talking about the next day. How do you know what the next day is going to bring? Why would you pray for the next day when that's an unknown? Ella de halif, rather must be the one that passed. So the morning, you're going to say, "Oh, today is so bad, that's better than yesterday. I wish it was yesterday." And then that night is going to be even worse than the day. And so that night you're going to say, "You know what? I wish I had what was the daytime yesterday." So you see from here that every day gets worse and worse. And as bad as it gets, you always say, "Well, you know what? Yesterday was actually better." Now, if this is true, that the curse continues more and more, why is the world continuing to exist? It's going to go down to just complete curse and nothing. And the answer, the merit of Kedusha de Sidra Vayehesh Shemeh Rabba de Agadatash Ne'mar Eres Aifata Kimo Ofel Samavet Velo Sedarim Hayesh Sedarim Tofia Me'ofel. It's for in the merit of Kedusha de Sidra. That's the Kadosh 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 that we say after the Amidah in the Ubale Sion. That is called Kedusha de Sidra. Sidra means a session of teaching, right? There will be a shiur, some kind of learning there. So that explains why in that one we say in Aramaic, right? We have two before we say Kedusha, but we don't translate. Here we translate because everybody knew Aramaic. And so this is a mini study session. Maybe in some places they'd have a long study session, but this is good for everyone, something that everybody can understand, and important Pesukim. And so Kedusha de Sidra, because of that study session. And also because of Yehesh Shemeh Rabba of Agadah. Whenever someone teaches some Agadah, it gives a derasha, it gives a shiur, then you say Kaddish to Rabbanan afterwards. And that's what they did in the times of the Talmud also. It says Agadah here, we do that for teaching of halacha also. But Agadah attracts many more people, and so everybody's there. And just like with Tefillah, a lot of people are there. So that's those study sessions, the one every morning. After Amidah, and every time somebody speaks, and then you say Yehesh Shemeh Rabba, the merit of those activities and prayers, that's what keeps the world going. How do you know that? Because Pasuk in Yov says, a land of thick darkness, and darkness itself, the land of shadow, without any order. So in the simple reading, without order, as everything is chaotic. But we're reading order as Seder, the Sidra, the order of the study sessions and the prayer sessions. But if you have Sedarim, then, if there's Lo Sedarim, then it'll be all darkness. But if there are Sedarim, then the land will appear from the midst of the darkness. So it's a merit of that even though there's the curse is no after the Bet HaMikdash, every day is cursed, but it's the Torah sessions that bring it back. Velo yarad tal libracha v'nital ta'am perot. Since the destruction of Bet HaMikdash, the dew does not descend for blessing, and the taste of fruits are lost. Tanya, Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar Omer. We have a braita that actually repeats the same thing as the Mishnah already said. Tahora bitela tam berech. Maaser bitel shuman dagan. When there was no more purity, people lost their level of purity. They also lost their taste and aroma of the fruit. The people in a tameh state cannot enjoy the fruit the same way. And also because maaser are not being separated, so the fat of the grain is also, people, you think, oh, I'm not going to get maaser, I'll have more. Actually, you're going to have less, because the the grain itself is going to be slimmer. Rav Huna ashkach tumarta dechinu nita. Okay, interesting story. Rav Huna found this fragrant date. It really smelled beautiful. Shekala keracha besudare, and he took it and wrapped it in a handkerchief. Ata Rabba bere. So Rav Huna's son Rabba came by. Amar le morchina recha dechinu nita, and the son said, I smell a fragrance of a date, even though it was all wrapped up. He was able to smell it. Amar le beni taharad yesh becha. Rav Huna said, my son, you must be very pure because you still are able to smell this the full smell of the fruits, like from the times of the Bet HaMikdash, right? You still have a level of tahara. Yahava nihale. So therefore he gave him the date, right? Enjoy it. Adhachi ata Abba bere. In the meantime, Abba, the son of Rabbah, came. It's a little confusing because Abba means father, but here it's actually the grandson of Rav Huna, the son of Rabbah. He happened to walk by. Shekala yahaba nihale. And so Rabbah, the son of Rav Huna, gave it to his son Abba, because everybody liked their son and he wants him to enjoy it. Amale beni simachta et libi vikita et shinai hainu damere inashe rahamed Abba abene rahamed ibne abene dehavule. And when Rav Huna saw that this present that he gave his son, his Rabbah gave to the grandson, he said, you have made my heart rejoice because I see that you have tahara and you're able to smell it, but you also blunted my teeth. You also set my teeth on edge and made me a little sad because it shows that you prefer your own son to me. I wanted to make you happy and see you enjoy this date, but you in turn re-gifted to your own son. And that's what the folk saying is, that the love of a father is for sons, but the love of sons is for their own sons more than their father. So it's kind of a paradox, but it's the very love that a father has for his son. It transfers not back to the father, but transfers to the next generation. And that's the way of the world. Rav Aha bar Yaakov itapal berav Yaakov bar berate ki gadal amar le ashkiyan maya amar lo la berich ana v'hainu damare inashe rebe rebe bar beratach ana. And now we'll quote yet another folk saying that also has to do with fathers and grandfathers. Rav Aha bar Yaakov took care of Rav Yaakov, who was his grandson, the son of his daughter, because his grandson was an orphan. And so the grandfather is taking care of him, which is very nice. Now the grandchild grew up, and the grandfather, Rav Aha bar Yaakov, one time says, can you bring me to drink some water? And the grandson said, I'm not your son. I'm not commanded in kabedet avicha ve'etimecha. I'm presuming he also brought it, but his point was, I'm doing it as a favor, but I don't have to do it because I'm not a son. And this is this is the folk saying that people say, right? You raise your grandchild, and in the end, he'll say, "I'm the son of your daughter. I'm not your child. I'm your grandson." Probably the folk saying has more to do with things about taking care of a person when they're elderly and inheritance, and so. Taking children is not the same relationship as grandchildren, as the previous quote also said. All right, next and last Mishnah. Bepolmos shel Aspasianos gazru al atrot hatanim ve'al ha'irus. More in the theme of the destruction of the Bet HaMikdash. And so we talk about the war. Polmos is a Greek word, right? Polemos. It's also the root of the word polemic. It means war or an army. When we say polemic in English, it means a fight, something that you do just to attack the other side. And so Pulmus, during the war of Vespasian, that's the great revolt of 70 CE, started several years early, 67 CE, and that's Vespasian. His son, he started the war, and his son, he became emperor in the middle. His son Titus took over, and Titus finally actually destroyed the Bet HaMikdash. And because of the sadness of that time, the rabbis made a gezerah that grooms should crowns upon grooms, that we should lower the level of joy in weddings weddings, and grooms no longer wear these crowns that they used to wear, and also irus, which apparently means drums. So the drumming at the wedding, of course, you're still gonna sing and dance and enjoy, but we're gonna lower it a little bit to remember that war and that destruction. בפולמוס של טיטוס גזרו על עטרות קלות ושלא ילמד אדם את בנו יוונית. In the war of Titus, that's the what it says in the printed edition, but this is a problem because Titus is just the son of Vespasian, and that was actually the same war, so it doesn't really make sense to have two different levels for these two, for the same war. So therefore, the correct reading, as you see in manuscripts, is the war of Kitos, instead of a tet, a kof. Which I'll explain in a second. During that war, they made a gezerah on the crowns of brides also, that we should lower the level of happiness at weddings even more. And also, they made a decree that one should not teach his son Greek, because these are Romans, and Romans, although in Rome they spoke Latin, but in the East, the foreigners spoke Greek. That was the common language of the Roman Empire in the East was Greek. And therefore, when the Romans were so evil and they came and they did these terrible wars and persecutions, I'll tell you what this persecution is referring to, they said, you know what, this is a horrible culture, a horrible people, they treat us, look how they treat us. We don't, shouldn't teach your child that language. By analogy, you can think of German, which was once so much was Jews spoke German and wrote in German and wrote Divrei Torah in German. It was just a normal language. But after the Holocaust, you hear German and you just get a bad feeling. So you know what? I don't want to. We don't want to learn German anymore. So that will be an analogy to this. Now, what is this Kitos? Who are we talking about? This is actually referring to a lesser known revolt that happened right between the destruction of the Bet HaMikdash in 70 CE and the Bar Kokhba revolt in 134. Between those two events, there was a diaspora revolt. It did not take place in Israel. Maybe that's why we don't learn so much about it, but rather in other countries. Trajan was the emperor. He was busy with the war in the east against the Parthians, and Jews in Egypt and Libya and Cyprus, as a reaction to tremendous anti-Semitism, the Jews rose up and rebelled, destroyed pagan temples, killed worshippers. Non-Jews retaliated, and it became a whole civil war, and the Romans came and brutally stopped it. We actually have some documentation from this, besides in the Talmud, also in Roman sources. And here's an actual inscription in a bathhouse in Cyrene that's commemorating this war, called the Tumult of the Jews. Dio Cassius greatly exaggerates, but he reports 220,000 Gentiles and all kinds of horrible things. So this was a very, very serious situation. The Rome in general, who came to put down this rebellion, was Lucius Quietus, or if written in Hebrew, Kitos. He was awarded, because he did such a good job, to be governor of Judea. So this is the Kitos War that the Mishnah is referring to, and it's at that time that they made these gezerot. Okay, it's a little bit ironic that they during the pulmus of Kitos, they said you can't teach your children Greek anymore, but the Mishnah itself uses a Greek loan word, pulmus, which comes from Greek and then enters into Hebrew to tell the decree that you can't learn Greek anymore. It actually says that using a Greek word, which shows that when you're living in that culture, it's kind of impossible to completely isolate. But they did recognize that the people around them have tremendous hatred. And therefore, they wanted to commemorate that, remember that, and put up this wall to distance themselves. בפולמוס האחרון גזרו שלא תעשה הקלה באפיריון בתוך העיר, ורבותינו התירו שתעשה הקלה באפיריון בתוך העיר. In the last war, meaning the Bar Kokhba revolt, the rabbis made a gezerah that a bride should not go out in a palanquin, right? But they hold the bride in a litter. she sits on a big chair, and people carry her on their shoulders, so that the bride should not go out in the city in such a way. This is like a huge happiness, and we're going to lower the happiness once again. However, the rabbis then permitted her to go out in the palanquin inside the city, because it's actually good for maybe one reason, for modesty. She stays inside. It's like a wagon that is held upon them, and so they thought, you know what, it actually is a good idea. Mishemet Rabbi Meir batlu moshle meshalim. Mishemet ben Azai batlu hashakdanim. When Rabbi Meir died, those who relate parables stopped. He used to relate parables. Ben Azai was shakdan. He was diligent in his learning, in his teaching. Mishemet ben Zoma batlu hadarshanim. Ben Zoma was known for his great derashot, his many important aphorisms and teachings. Mishemet Rabbi Akiva batal kevod Torah. Rabbi Akiva brought honor to the Torah, the way he was doresh, the way he was learned things from extra letters and crowns, and so he was the last that could bring such honor. Mishemet Rabbi Chanina ben Dosa batlu anshe maaseh. Rabbi Chanina, he would do a lot of good deeds, kind deeds, help people. He was known as a miracle worker, a healer. Mishemet Rabbi Yosef Katonta pasku Chasidim. Rabbi Yosef Katonta was the last of the Chasidim. And why was he called the little one? Because he was the smallest of all the pious people, right? Meaning there were so many others that were even greater than him, and he was the last of that person, you could say, the Chasidim. Mishemet Rabban Yochanan ben Zakkai batal ziv hachochma. When Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai died, the glory of wisdom stopped. Mishemet Rabban Gamliel hazaken batal kebod haTorah umeta tahora uperishut. Rabban Gamliel hazaken, when he died, the honor of the Torah stopped, and purity and asceticism died. He was known for all those traits. Mishemet Rabbi Ishmael ben Pavi batla ziv hakehuna. He was the last of the great Kohanim, and with him the glory of Kehunat stopped. Mishemet Rabbi Yehuda Nasi batal anava v'irat hayet. Humility and fear of sin ceased. It's a question to if Rabbi Yehuda Nasi is the author of the Mishnah. He put this in and he said, "I'm the last of the humble." Probably not. So it could indicate that either the Mishnah does have later layers, even after Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, of could be added lines or statements that he didn't put in himself. Tenor Rabbanan, Rabbi Pinchas ben Yair Omer, Bishachare Bet HaMikdash, Boshu Chaverim u'Bnei Chorim, Ve'chafu Rosham, Ve'nidaldelu Anshe Maaseh, Ve'gabru Ba'alei Zeroa, u'Ba'alei Lashon, Ve'en Doresh, Ve'en Mevakesh, Ve'en Shoel. Expanding on the theme of what happened, what we lost at the destruction of the Bet HaMikdash. The Chaverim, that's the community of people who are very strict in their observance of mitzvot, and Bnei Chorin, noble people, free people, that normally were very honored, they were ashamed, and the people of action that did mitzvot dwindled, and those who were violent or smooth talkers, mafia people, they became ascendant, and no one could ask or seek. No one can inquire from heaven. There were no more of these great people that could make these types of make strong prayers and get rid of these evil people. Right? Nobody could speak up. They're all afraid of these thugs. So what can we do? What do we do now that these thugs are in charge? All we can do is rely on our Father in heaven. We can't go to a great tzaddik and or great leaders. They were all ashamed. They were all gone, and so we have to just appeal directly to Hashem. Rabbi Eliezer Hagadol Omer, Yom shechara bet hamikdash sharu chakimayel meheveh כספריה, וספריה כחזניה, וחזניה כעמד הרעה. After the Bet HaMikdash was destroyed, the level of scholars They were downgraded, and they were like scribes. Scribes, they know how to write, they know how to read, they're good to teach children. And whoever was previously a scribe, they became like chazan. A chazan means like a shamash. They take care of things in the Bet Knesset. And shamash, who at least knows something, right? Because he's around and he's somewhat knowledgeable. They lowered their level to be like an Am Haaretz. And the Am Haaretz, azla v'daldela v'en shoel v'en mevakesh. And even those who were at least something, they increasingly diminished, and there was none to ask and none to seek. What are we going to do now, right? Where they were on certain levels, and now everybody moved a level down. What can we do? We can only have faith, have trust, and pray to God that things should get better. הגפן תיתן פריה והיין ביוקר ומלכות תהפך למינות. In the times before the Mashiach, and here's when you should have hope. When things are really bad, then that's the time actually to have hope, which is a good thing. Impudence will increase and high costs will pile up. Things will be impudence of these thugs, and then they're probably corrupt, and so things will be very expensive. And even though the vine will bring forth its fruits, the vines will work. It's not talking about a time of famine. The grapes will grow, but nevertheless, the wine will be expensive. Probably because people are taking cuts all the way through, and everything is corrupt, or people are drinking so much wine because they have to get out of their sorrow and misery. And the empire will turn to heresy. This probably is referring to the time when the Roman Empire actually becomes Christian. In the 300s, the whole thing turns Christian. They tried to persecute the Christians, but if you can't beat them, join them. And that's what the Roman Empire did. And there's no one can bring a reproof to anyone, and the meeting place of the sages becomes a place of promiscuity. And Galilee will be destroyed. Gavlan, probably in the Golan Heights, will be desolate, and the men of the borders will go to city looking for charity, and no one will have mercy on them. The wisdom of scribes putrefy. The people of fear who fear sin will be held in disgust. The truth will be absent. Ne'arim pene zikanim yalbinu zikanim yamdu pene ketanim. Children will shame the elders, and the elders will have to stand for the children. Ben minavel av bat kama be'ima kala b'hamota. A son will disgrace a father. A daughter will rise up against a mother. A daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law. Oibe ish anshe beto. A people's enemies are going to be his own family members. Peneh hador kifneh hakeleb haben eno mitbayesh me'aviv. The face of the generation will be like that of a dog. People have no shame, like dogs have no shame. People will just do sin and have no embarrassment about it. Even a son will not be embarrassed before his father. What do we do when things are so bad? Well, all we can do is look up to our Father in heaven and hope that things will get better. Amar Rav, lo shanu ela shel melach v'gofrit, aval shel hadas v'shel vered mutar. Now, going back to the ban about wearing crowns, this halacha is only talking about crowns of salt and sulfur, which apparently they would wear. But if it's made out of myrtle and roses, that's okay. It's not that they can't wear any jewelry, any crowns at all, but just has to be a lower level one. Maybe this salt to be like kind of carved in a beautiful way. Ushmel amar av shel hadas v'shel vered asur. Shmuel said, no, even the ones of myrtle and rose are not allowed. Shel kani v'shel chelat mutar. But you can make one out of reeds and bulrush, lower down even. Levi amar av shel kani v'shel chelat asur. Levi said, even that's too fancy because we're really in mourning. V'chen tane levi matnita av shel kani v'shel chelat asur. You can't even use ones of reeds, no crowns at all. And so we mentioned that Also, they decreed against drums. What does that mean? We're talking about a drum with one mouth, maybe like a darbake, right? It has like one face or one opening at the bottom. And so one time Rab made for his son, for his wedding, a tambourine, tanbura, same letters. Ata abu tebare. And his father came and he broke it. Amar le michalaf betabla dechad puma. This is the tambourine. Well, technically that's okay, but it's going to look like a drum with one mouth, this type of drum. And people will say, if that's allowed, then this is allowed. So he says, no, we're not going to allow any of them. But the only thing you can do is go and make a little drum on the mouth of a jug or a mouth of a container. So you take a clay container and you put some skin or something on it, bang that. You could have a little drum, but even a tambourine is going to be too much like an actual drum. So in this middle war, kitos should be, they said, they talked about the crowns of brides that she cannot wear. We're talking about a city of gold. This is what this looked like, right? Very rich woman could wear a crown, and on the crown it would be decorated with a horizon of a city. And this was a common Hellenistic type of jewelry of the different cities. And we have a braita that supports that this is the crowns of brides are these cities. But even though you can't make that out of gold, but you can make a cap of fine wool, and you have something on her head. When we talk about Yerushalayim Shel Zahav, that's what we're talking about, right? We're talking about a Jewish woman who would be very, very, very fancy and very rich. They could buy this kind of crown with the skyline of Yerushalayim on it, right? And that's what Rabbi Akiva promises his wife, right? If I get a chance, I'll buy you a Yerushalayim Shel Zahav, and that's where the song comes from, which is appropriate for Yerushalayim, Yom Yerushalayim coming up. But at the destruction of Yerushalayim, then they said no more of such crowns. Tana, af al hopat hatanim gazru. They also decreed regarding the canopy of grooms. My hopat hatanim, what does that mean? Zehori tamuz havot. We're talking about this gold and crimson clothing that they would use to decorate the marriage canopy. Of course, you have to have a canopy. You have to have a chuppah. But this is some extra special, fancy type of chuppah. Tanyana mehachi elu hen chupot hatanim zorit hamuz havot aval ose pafirit vetole ba kol ma sheyirse. And this is what the Braita teaches, that you cannot use this golden crimson on it, but you can make papyrus and hang other things, other ornaments on it. But just not this particular type. You may not teach your son Greek. בכל יום ויום היו משלשלים דינרים בקופה ומעלין להן תמידין. Braita teaches a very important historical event, that when the kings of the Hasmoneans were fighting each other, we're talking about two of the last kings. This is the two sons of Shlomzion HaMalka. Shlomzion HaMalka, she has a nice street named after her. Everybody knows where that street is, past the David Citadel. And she was remembered to be a wonderful queen, and she had two sons. Hyrcanus was the oldest, so by rights he should be the next Kohen Gadol and king, but Aristobulus was more ambitious and stronger, and so he wanted to be king. And now these two brothers are fighting each other over who will be the next king after their mother died. And so every day, so there was a siege. Hyrcanus was outside of Jerusalem, besieging the city, and Aristobulus and his forces were inside the city. So Aristobulus since he's inside, the Beit HaMikdash is inside. And they made a deal that, listen, even though we want to kill each other, but we still want the Beit HaMikdash to continue giving the Korban Tamid. So every day, the people on the inside would send down money in a box from the top of the wall, and the people outside would put an animal in the box and bring it up, and they would sacrifice that animal because animals are outside in the fields. And that way, even though they're fighting, they were able to coordinate and continue offering the korban tamid. Hayam sham zaken echad שהיה מכיר בחוכמת יוונית, לעז להם בחוכמת יוונית, אמר להם כל זמן שעוסקים בעבודה, אין נמסרים בידכם, למחר שישאלו להם דינרים בקופה, והעלו להם חזיר, כיוון שהגיע לחסי חומה, נעש ציפורניו, נזדעזעה ארץ ישראל, 400 פרסה. There was an elder there, a wicked guy, and he knew Chokhmat Yevanit, Greek wisdom. Apparently it was referring to some kind of pantomime. Greeks in their theaters, because their theaters were big and they didn't have microphones, so they could talk loud, but people still wouldn't be able to hear. They had to really act it out, and in a way, like pantomimes, like mimes, have to be able to express themselves even without speaking. So they had different ways of hinting to kind of a sign language, and so they were expert in. So this elder, he was an expert in this, and he communicated to the people outside in this way. I guess he couldn't say it out loud because someone might hear him, especially if he was inside, and then they know he's a spy. But really, he wanted the people inside to lose, and so he was able to communicate in this way. And this is going to explain why they made a decree against Greek, because it was because of this guy who was using a Greek type of sign language or Greek wisdom to communicate the end of the stopping of the korbanot. So this is a particular reason why they made a decree against Greek at this time. So he said this is a message that he was able to sign to the pantomime to the outside. As long as the people inside here are engaged in the Bet HaMikdash service and giving korbanot every day, you will not be able to beat the city. The Bet HaMikdash is protecting the city of Yerushalayim. And so they got the message, and the next day on the inside they lowered down the money as usual, and the people outside, instead of giving them a kosher animal to be on the Mizbeach, they put in a pig. And the pig started going up. It reached halfway up the wall, and it stuck its hooves into the wall. And Eretz Yisrael had an earthquake for 400 parsa that this unkosher animal is now going in. And that was the end of the Korban Tamid. When the Korban Tamid stopped, then they lost their protection, and then the wall, and then they were able to enter into the city. Otah sha'amru, arur adam shegadel chazirim, v'arur adam she'lemed lebeno chokhmat yevanit. ועל אותה שנה שנינו מעשהו בעומר מגגות צריפים ושתי הלחם מבקעת עין סוחר. So the rabbis got together and they said, cursed is a person who raises pigs, because a pig was used for this terrible situation, and cursed is the one who will teach his son chokhmat yevanit, Greek wisdom, because it was used against in order to stop the korbanot. And that year there was such, as it says, the earthquake, and the land was cursed, that when they wanted to bring the omer of barley, they couldn't find any barley anywhere nearby, and they had to bring it all away from Gagot Tzirifim, a far place. And when Shavuot came and had to bring the first wheat, they couldn't find wheat anywhere nearby, and they could only find it far away in Ayin Socher, and that's how terrible the situation was. We next have a couple of challenges against this prohibition of teaching Greek. Ini v'hamar Rabbi be'eretz Yisrael lashon sursi lama, ela I lashon hakodesh I lashon yevanit. Rabbi Yehuda Nasi said, if Jews are living in Israel, why would they bother speaking Syriac? Syriac is like a kind of a dialect of Aramaic. Rather, either they should speak Hebrew or Greek. In other words, Lashon HaKodesh, that's the best. If you're going to speak Hebrew, that's wonderful. And if you're not going to speak Hebrew, then second best is Greek. Greek is a beautiful language. The rabbis considered it beautiful. Yaft Elohim leyefet, right? Yefet, ancestor of Yavan, Greece, right? They're called beautiful. And so why bother speaking anything if Hebrew, good, first choice, Greek, second choice? This is the question. Rabbi Yehuda Nasi himself said, it's okay. It's nice to speak Greek. So it means that there's obviously not anything wrong with it. And so why can't you learn Greek? Teach your son Greek. To finish off the statement, in parallel, Rav Yosef said about those Jews living in Bavel, why would they bother speaking Aramaic? Either speak Hebrew, that's first choice. If not, then speak Persian. That's the language of the government there, and so that would be second best. That's a high class language, right? But why bother with Aramaic? Okay, so see that Rabbi Yehuda Nasi supported speaking Greek. So how could you say there's a ban on speaking Greek? Lashon Yavanit lechud v'chochmat Yavanit lechud, and the answer is that there's a distinction between Greek language and Greek wisdom. Greek language, just to speak the language, that's okay. It's even considered a nice language. Rabbis talk about praying in Greek, reading Torah, writing a Torah in Greek. That's okay. The problem, the thing that they made the gezerah against, is Greek wisdom. What exactly is Greek wisdom? A lot of discussion about this. What does it include? What does it not include? The Greeks studied everything, so you're not going to study anything? It seems from the context of the story before that it had to do something with Greek forms of communication, like miming, pantomime, and by extension, theatrical arts, the culture and general entertainment. They would put on plays, dramatic plays, and maybe that was all very much inspired by Homer and mythology, so it can extend to things like that. So that seems that's the problem. That whole area of things is the problem, and they wanted people not to teach their children this because they were so affected by it and thought of it so negatively. But Greek language is a separate matter. Interestingly, this phrase chokhmat Yavanit and this distinction appears only in the Talmud Bavli. Not in the sources from Eretz Yisrael, where the ban is about everything, just Greek language, and there's no distinction. And the reason is simple. In Eretz Yisrael, under the Roman Empire, if you were teaching Greek language, then automatically, together with the language, you read the Greek text and the mythology, it all comes together. They're teaching things in Greek, if it's Greek wisdom. So it's a kind of all or nothing package. In Bavel, however, people are not speaking Greek. That's not the language that's normally spoken. And therefore, those studying Greek wisdom would be studying it in Syriac or other languages. And so therefore, in Bavel, it makes sense to distinguish between the language and the knowledge itself. All right, now challenge to this conclusion. V'chokhmat Yavanit mi asira. Even that, is that true that Greek wisdom is prohibited? ואמר רב יהודה אמר שמעון משום רבן שמעון בן גמליאל מה דכתיב אני עוללה לנפשי מכל בנות עירי 1,000 ילדים היו בבית אבא 500 למדו תורה ו500 למדו חוכמת יוונית ולא נשתה מהן אלא אני כאן ובן אחי אבא בעשייה. We have a statement of Shemuel in the name of Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel, who's from the family of the Nasi, of the patriarch. And it says, quoting Kohelet, my eye affected my soul due to all the daughters of my city. Very sad to see what happened to the daughters of the city, meaning the people that lived in the city. And he's referring specifically to the students in his father's yeshiva. He said, my father, the Nasi, had 1,000 students in his school. 500 learned Torah. 500 learned Chokhmat Yevanit. And they were all wiped out, and all that's left is me. And I have a cousin who lives in Asia Minor. So that's a tradition that we have. What do we see from here? That Rabban Gamliel, his father, in fact, did teach his students and his son Chokhmat Yevanit. So that means that must be permitted. And the answer is Shane Shel Bet Rabban Gamliel de Kirobin Malchut Avu de Tanya. Mesaper Komi הרי זה מדרכי המורי. אבטולוס בן ראובן התירו לספר קומי, שהוא קרוב למלכות. שבית רבן גמליאל התירו להן חוכמת יוונית, מפני שקרבין למלכות. Rabban Gamliel and his family and his yeshiva is different because they were close to the government. They were, in fact, close to the Roman government. The Roman government saw them as being the ones in charge of the entire Jewish community. And therefore, they had to have a regular communication with the important officials of the Roman government, and because of that, they had to know how to speak Greek. That's Greek language, but not only that, they had to know how to present themselves, how to discuss issues, and that primarily would be the art of rhetoric, how to give an oration, how to, if they had to plead on behalf of the Jewish community, or propose a law, go against, or act as a lawyer, or speak to the Senate. So they'd have to have the Greek style of communication, including the proper hand gestures. That was a big part. When one is speaking, you have to know the exact hand gestures that go along with it. That's related to that pantomime of the theater. And so that in particular would be the most important skill of Greek wisdom that the patriarchal leaders would have to know, the Nasi would have to know. And therefore, they were permitted to teach their sons Chokhmat Yevanit. And they were exceptional, however. Not everybody should do this, only those who have a need to. And we know this from a Braita that if someone cuts his hair in komi style, probably means a rounded, like a bowl head, where you cut all around the head and leave and shave everything under it, so that it looks like there's a bowl on top of someone's head and his hair. This is darkei mori. This is not permitted for anyone to do. For just anyone to do, because this is a pagan type of haircut, like monks. However, the rabbis did permit this individual of Tolos ben Reuven because he was close to the government. He was government official or speaking with government people all the time, and he had to look the part in order to be successful in lobbying for Jewish interests, and so they permitted him. And also from the house of Rabban Gamliel, they permitted them to learn Chokhmat Yevanit because they were close to the government. And so here you see they had special permission. So if there's a special need for it, then the rabbis allowed it. But in general, this was not the rabbis prohibited it after the wars against the Romans. Okay, but Pamos Acharun Gazu Shelo Teseh Kala B'Pidyon. In the Bar Kokhba revolt, they decreed that brides should not go and travel and be carried in a palanquin. But then they changed their mind and they permitted it. Why did they permit it? Because they thought that it was more modest for her to be put in that wagon and carried and not have to mingle in the middle of the street with everyone. Mishemet Rabban Gamliel Bata HaChochma. Rabban Gamliel, Rabbi Yochanan, we said, was the last of people of wisdom. Tenor Banan, Mishemet Rabbi Eliezer Nignas Sefer Torah. When Rabbi Eliezer died, he's the one that, remember, was excommunicated, and he had so much Torah. He had more traditions than anybody else, and nobody to learn them. And that's it. And because he was excommunicated, people did not study from him, and all that Torah was lost. So it was as if a Torah scroll was put away and lost. When Rabbi Yoshua died, then counsel and deliberate thought ceased. He was very insightful and had good insight and wisdom. Died, the powerful arm of the Torah. He was such a powerful figure, and the fountains of wisdom were sealed. She'ateret Chachamim Oshram. When Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah died, the crowns of wisdom stopped. As the pasuk says, crown of the wise is their riches. He was both, had great Torah and also was wealthy. That's why he was appointed temporarily to be the Nasi when Rabban Gamliel was deposed, because he was both great in Torah and great in wisdom, so that he would not be able to be harmed. Mishemet Rabbi Chanina ben Dosa batlu anshe ma'aseh. Rabbi Chanina ben Dosa was the end of the people of great acts of righteousness and healing and being a miracle worker. Mishemet Abad Yosef ben Katonta batlu Chasidim. Ve'lam nekro shemo Abba Yosef ben Katonta sham miketane Chasidim. Rabbi Yosef ben Katonta was the last of the people that were worthy to be called Chasidim. And why was he called ben Katonta? That he was the least of the Chasidim, and he was so great. or a different interpretation. In his time, there were already so few. He was among the few of the Hasidim as they were dwindling down. Mishemet ben Azai batlu, Hashakdanim ben Azai died. Those diligent in their study were ceased. Mishemet ben Zoma badlu hadarshanim. Mishemet Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel alag gobai verabu sarot. Mishemet Rabbi huchpelu sarot. Ben Zoma we saw was a great darshan, had many important aphorisms that he taught. And Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel, when he died, the locusts descended and troubles proliferated, and Rabbi Yehuda Nasi died, troubles multiplied even more. Mishemet Rabbi Badlana Virat Chet. Rabbi was the last of the paradigm of humility and fear of sin. Amar le Rav Yosef letana lo titene anava deika ana. Amar le Rav Nachman letana la titene Virat Chet deika ana. Rav Yosef told the Tanah, the professional memorizer, and he said, no, when you talk about Rabbi, when Rabbi died, that was the end of humility. Don't say he was the end of humility, because there's still someone who is very humble, and that's me. Rav Nachman said, when you teach that the Rabbi Yehuda Nasi was the end of Yirat Chet, that's how you usually teach it. I want you to change the language of that and take out the Yirat Chet. How do you know? Because me, right? I have Yirat Chet also, and so Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, don't worry, he's not the end of Yirat Chet. Okay, how could someone say about himself that, don't worry, I'm the most humble? Well, it's because people that are truly humble doesn't mean that they're self-effacing and think that they are worth zero. It means that they know their qualities and work on them, and don't hold themselves above anyone else, but actually use their high qualities and talents to inspire others and bring others along to do the same. And so in that spirit, we hope that their merit will rub off on us as well as we complete Masechet Sotah. Hadran alach egla arufa uselik ala Masechet Sotah. Hazakim uberuchim.